Alright, guys. The planets that once loomed large in our skies in the Golden Age, they had many different regional names, thus the confusion that we see today. And in Egypt, there were over 2,000 gods from ancient Egypt, and they were mostly recycled old gods. And the elite scribes and priests, as Egypt progressed, they were like the government, and they told the commoners that without living a moral life, you had no chance of a successful afterlife. And in fact, Egypt had 42 commandments, 42 sins, and they told the common people that after death, you will have to pass through 42 doors, guarded by 42 gods. It was called the negative confession and the weighing of the heart, which at one point your heart would be weighed against the feather of the god Maat. And if you were found to be evil, you might be consumed by a god and cease to exist. Or perhaps you would be thrown into a lake of fire. But if you made it through, you would most likely be lucky to plow the fields of the gods for eternity. However, secret cheat codes existed. There were some 200 of these spells and incantations on the menu that you could choose from if you could afford them. If you could afford to pay these royal scribes and priests with this expensive papyrus to create you a so-called Book of the Dead. It would cost you about a half year's wages. If you were in a hurry, you could buy a pre-made Book of the Dead and they would just fill your name in the blank. We have about 25,000 examples that have been collected of the so-called Book of the Dead. And when you look it up, that's not even the real translation. The actual translation is the Book of Emerging Forth into the Light. Now, one of these spells that you could purchase was the clone spell that would make clones of yourself in the afterlife, that would plow the fields of the gods for you so that you could pursue other leisurely activities. Another spell would prevent your heart from snitching on you, whether you followed the commandments or not. And these two spells were very popular spells, as you can imagine. Other spells would give you godlike attributes and abilities if you could afford them. Mind and money control are best done voluntarily, and the scam continues today, with the priests suggesting that you tithe 10% of your wages monthly to your temple for your afterlife. Only a few of the details have changed. And so I am suggesting that Moses, coming out of Egypt, streamlined the 42 commandments down to 10, setting the stage for the Israelites to slaughter an entire region of people through deception and deviousness. The Egyptians spoke of Osiris dying and rising again. And here we see the feather of Maat. The Egyptians speak of the original god or man, Atum, Atum, having 2 children. And this is all too familiar with Moses' Adam and his 2 children. The lake of fire, the commandments. Moses modernized and streamlined the Egyptian myths. And just as the Egyptian priests and scribes played on the afterlife fears of the living for millennia, so too did the Jews and the people of today. The best known Book of the Dead is the Scroll of Ani, 78 feet long, discovered by an employee of the British Museum in 1881. His name was Ernest Budge. And he gained possession of this scroll through the black market in Egypt, which was illegal. And he was actually jailed. But some of his partners bribed the guards, got him out of jail, and they went to the storehouse where the scroll and other artifacts were being held, and they rented a room in a hotel next to this storehouse and ended up boring through the wall to get the scroll and the artifacts, and they escaped back to Britain. And while having good intentions, Ernest Budge cut these strips, or cut the scroll into sections and glued them onto wood panels to make it easier to work with. But you can look up the Scroll of Ani and look at these colorful, best example of the book of emerging forth into the light. These plasma instabilities seen during the cataclysm when Saturn was our sun. Here again, perhaps this is the feather of Maat. We remembered and we documented what was seen. Some people chose to turn it into a control system because they interpreted it as the gods, or God, or El Shaddai, the god of the mountain, the cosmic mountain. But the planet Saturn was Horus the bull. And this serpent myth says the serpents were greatly dreaded by the people. Even Ra feared them. And I believe they're talking about the electrical plasma, lightning, thunderbolts of the gods. It says Ra was bitten by the serpent, which Isis, which is Venus, created. And when he left the earth and ascended to heaven, after reigning over men, he spoke of them as his enemies. This is Satan, Saturn, being thrown out of the heavens and from the war in heaven. Global myth, which is actually truth and fact. Okay, these are the plasma formations that were seen and personified, documented. Satan, Saturn, was beautiful until he wasn't, until he damn near killed everyone. You see this depiction, they call it Ra, Amen-Ra, Thoth, many recyclings. origin of the Native American headdress with these feathers. Even the Egyptians had the headdress with the feathers because of what was seen in the cataclysm. These petroglyphs are about an hour from my house. They are everywhere globally. It wasn't just a plague on Egypt, it was a plague on the entire earth. El Shaddai, the god of the mountain, the Cossack mountain, this one right here, when Satan/Saturn was thrown out of the heavens, and the Jews continued to have their holy day on Saturn's Day. Don't buy into the scam. Thanks for listening, guys. Have a good night.